Okay, mic check, mic check. Can you guys hear me in the live chat? Just want to make sure I'm loud and clear. Okay, Tony Knox says loud and clear. Not going to start the show just yet because there is very few people tuned in right now. I've got 27 concurrent viewers, 35 now. There's a few more joining. When we get to 100, I'll start then. If you could all drop a like on this stream, it will help visibility. There might be an issue with notifications. So, as I say, if you drop a like on it, it will help with visibility so people see it. Shout out to High Roll Protagonist for the super chat early. Thank you very much, sir. You are much appreciated. We got Maurice in the place. We got Ortega. We got KS. Seamus McMichael, big up every time. We got G-Man 1994. Tony Knox. Anton and Jake Parsons. Shout out to each and every one of you. Very much appreciate you joining me here. We got Don Gargan 78. Jerry Berry. We got Jay in the chat. Shout out to Jay. Maurice says, I think Beterbiev, Dubois, Stevenson, Sheeraz, Madrimov, Buatsi, and Kabayel will win. Okay, we're going to get to that in a moment. KS says, big up Hatman and big up yourself, sir. Ortega says, well gone Hatman, buzzing for the boxing this Saturday. Me too. Seamus says, never read a book in my life. He's quoting John Fury there. Shout out to Seamus. Yes, Tony Knox. G-Man says, I'm getting a feeling Sheeraz will get stopped. Just a gut feeling. You know, sometimes those gut feelings turn out to be bang on, don't they? I remember in the run-up to the AJ Ruiz fight, the first fight, I had this massive gut feeling that AJ was going to lose. Me and my girlfriend at the time were both saying that we had a feeling he was just going to get chinned. Like all week. And we were contemplating putting a load of money. We're contemplating putting some money on it because the odds were long. And we procrastinated. And in the end, we didn't put money on it. And obviously after what happened, we were both like, oh my days, we should have put that money on it. We both had this gut feeling that he was going to lose and get stopped. So sometimes you got to go with your gut. Big Boys Boxing says 260 pounds for Joe. You don't like it, you think he's too heavy. Shout out to Goozy. Well, the weigh-in will be Friday, right? So we'll see what he actually weighs because even if he looks heavy, sometimes looks can be deceiving and fighters can come in heavier or lighter than you expected them to be. Not that I'm doubting what you're saying there, 260. He might come in that big. I don't think he's ever weighed 260 for a fight before, has he, Joe Parker? That would be a career heaviest. I'm assuming I've caught people at the wrong time here. I guess it's rush hour or something, right? For most people. And maybe they're also watching the live stream of the open workouts. So we got a very small audience here, but that's okay. I'll chat to who's here, hang out for a while, and people will join in along the way. Jerry Berry says he's in school. Wow. Slacking off then. Slacking off to listen to me. Big Boys Boxing says he is currently at 119.9 kilos. Is that what he says? Salute to Fight Sport Talk. Always great to have you on board over there in New Zealand. What's the weather like out there? I'm not sure what the seasons are in New Zealand. Encircled says 264. Damn, he is screwed. Where are these weights coming from? The weigh-in's not today, is it? That'd be. I've never seen a weigh-in on a Wednesday when the fight's on Saturday. So where are these weights coming from? Or are they weighing the heavyweights in several days early because it doesn't really matter? They don't have a weight to make. Some people are saying it's self-reported. A shout out to Nathan. Says, at the gym on Holiday Hatman Live is the perfect a compliment. Much respect. Bilal says, Hatman, is this the best card ever? I think it is. You know, in order to say it's the best card ever, you'd have to know every card ever. And I don't know every card ever. But I know that a lot of the Don King cards back in the days, because I remember them, I watched them at the time, were fantastic. So, you know, it's kind of hyperbolic from the promoters and what have you to call it the best card ever, but it's a great card for sure. Andy says, anyone think Joe Joyce is slower these days? Cognitive than normal, slower to think and respond than normal, just seems out of it constantly. Many people say this, but personally I can't see it because I remember several interviews early on in Joe Joyce's career where he literally couldn't get any words out at all. I remember him being asked a question on camera and he just stood there like brain freeze for, I'm not joking, maybe 10 seconds, and he couldn't even get a word out. And then the interviewer had to answer the question for him. I remember that way back, way before the Zhang fights, way before he was taken, or he had taken the majority of the punishment. So as bad as he is now at talking and processing information and verbalizing it, I've seen him just as bad back in the days. But that's just me. That's what I've observed. That's what I remember. Okay, Goozy says, I think it's a check weight by the British Boxing Board of Control. I'm not sure why they would have check weights for heavyweights, though. Check weights are normally for people that have to make weight, for those below heavyweight. But a heavyweight, I don't know what the purpose of a check weight would be. Fight Sport Talk says, I'm really nervous about Parker being heavy. Against Joyce, he was heavy because he was sick. Yeah, he said he was sick long after the fact. You know, he didn't want to make an excuse immediately after the fight, but recently, in the past few weeks, he said he was sick in the Joyce fight. Cash says, this card is really incredible. I'm actually looking forward to watching all the fights, something that never happens to me. And me too. I mean, I've heard conflicting reports. Some people are saying that Buatsi against Smith will be the first fight shown on the card. Other people are saying it's actually Zhang versus Kabayel. Either way, I'm happy. KS says, was a bit rich from Dylan White to take a dig at Joyce when he's slurring words himself. That's a whole fact. Dylan White is pretty punchy too. No doubt about it. Issa says, have you seen Floyd Schofield is out, Hatman? The replacement is Josh Padley, the guy who just beat Mark Chamberlain. Yeah, I just did a video about it. I uploaded a video about it, what was it, an hour or so ago? About that situation. Yeah, so I'm aware of that whole thing with the Schofield father and son claiming that Shakur Stevenson paid a mole to infiltrate their camp and sabotage it. This is what he's claiming. There are some people blaming it on the Saudis, but according to Schofield Sr., this stuff started many weeks ago in America. Like I say, claiming that he's been sabotaged and their rental cars got their tires slashed and their tickets to Saudi got ripped up and their passports got stolen. I think at one point he said drugs were planted in their car. This is in America. And he's blaming it all on a mole that Stevenson paid to put in his camp. So make of that what you will. And also, if you look at the photo of Floyd Schofield in the hospital bed, the tubes, you know, normally when someone is intubated or hooked up with whatever in a hospital bed, they've normally got a tube going up their nose, right? When they're intubated, they've got a tube going down their mouth. If you look closely at that photo, those things which maybe are tubes look more like wires. And look very closely, they're not actually going into his mouth, or they don't appear to be going into his mouth in the photo, and they're definitely not going up his nose. Is that normal? I don't know. I don't know whether that's normal, but normally when I see a picture of someone in a hospital bed, as I say, they've got a tube up their nose, something in their mouth. This guy appears to have neither. So make it out what you will. Andy A says, thoughts on Eubank Sr. recently saying his son is not a reflex fighter, states his son's old style was better, and him keeping his hands down like Roy Jones has just made him worse. See, the problem with Eubank Sr. is that he loves the limelight. He absolutely loves it. I'm going to use a word which, in my opinion, is misused these days, and that is narcissistic. Eubank Sr. is a narcissist, but unfortunately, for some weird reason, in psychology, they have now basically conflated narcissism with psychopathy, when they're actually two different things. Now, you could definitely argue that every psychopath is a narcissist. They're inherently narcissistic, okay? But most narcissists are not psychopaths. Originally, and this is what you have to understand about these terms in psychology, the meaning of these terms has actually changed over time. If you go back to Freud, the way he defined narcissism, it was more so based on the myth or the legend of Narcissus, who was a person that became obsessed with his own reflection, was very vain and fell in love with his image. So earlier on in previous decades in psychology, a narcissist was just somebody that was very self-absorbed and, you know, obsessed with themselves, loved talking about themselves and all that kind of thing. And that fits with the story of Narcissus. But in recent years, really, I want to say the past 5 or 6 years, some psychologists have started to conflate narcissism with psychopathy, as if you could use those terms interchangeably. I don't know why they've done that. It's very strange. And one of the things that everyone needs to understand about psychology is it's not a science, because you can't weigh, measure, or count thoughts, right? It's all just the interpretation of human behavior. And there are many different schools of thought within psychology, and different psychologists have got different definitions for terms. This is why in the hard sciences, they kind of scoff at the idea that psychology could be a science, because they don't have standardized terms and so on and so forth. But anyway, using a more traditional definition of narcissism, Eubank Sr. is a narcissist, okay? He loves himself, his own reflection. He loves being the focus of attention, so on and so forth. He's very, you know, gentle, and he's not a John Fury type narcissist, okay? But he's very self-absorbed. So, of course, he's going to criticize his son, because his son has decided to be his own man. And in being his own man, Eubank Sr. can't be the center of attention anymore. So I take Eubank Sr.'s criticisms of his son on board, but I'm also well aware that, you know, the dad is somewhat narcissistic, so he won't necessarily be objective. All right, let's get the show rocking and rolling here onto the main topic of discussion, which is your predictions. This show is really about you guys and what you think, not so much what I think, although, you know, I'll give my input. So here we are. The card on Saturday is fantastic. Obviously, Stevenson Schofield is off. It's now Stevenson against Josh Padley, a late replacement. I did some polls on my YouTube community page, or the community tab on my YouTube channel page, should I say. And as you can see, for the Joshua Buatsi, Callum Smith fight, the vast majority of people are picking Joshua Buatsi. 75% of you are picking Joshua Buatsi to win. Does that surprise you guys in the live chat? I'm not sure how many of you voted, but does it surprise you that a full 75% based on this of my, obviously most of my subscribers didn't actually cast the vote, but if this is anything to go by, perhaps my subscriber base, 75% of them think Joshua Buatsi is going to do the business. Mostly on points is what people are going for. But there is still a few picking Joshua Buatsi by KO. What do you guys in the live chat think about this? Do you think different? Or does this go along with your sentiment on the fight? See, I agree with Cash. Cash says Smith is prone to being bullied. It happened against Ryder, Canelo, Beterbiev. I reckon Buatsi can do the same. I am 100% in agreement with you. That's the way I see it. And the thing is, Joshua Buatsi is very physically strong. Very physically strong. As you say, if Ryder bullied him, and Canelo bullied him, and Beterbiev bullied him, I reckon Buatsi's going to bully him too. Obviously, as other people have pointed out here, like Andy pointed out, Callum Smith is a good counterpuncher and he hits hard. But once you put him in his shell, as Cash alluded to, he doesn't normally come out of it, does he? He goes in his shell and then he doesn't come out. So it'll be a matter of whether Buatsi can put him in his shell. The thing that gives Callum Smith a chance, apart from his counterpunching, is that Buatsi fights in spurts, doesn't he? He doesn't tend to fight for 3 minutes of a round. His stamina, in my opinion, is suspect, Joshua Buatsi. He manages his way through the rounds. He's been the distance multiple times, but he does so by taking big breaks in the fight. And it's in those breaks where Callum Smith needs to get to work if he's going to win the fight. Andy A says he tends to catch and shoot a lot, but ends up going wrong for him. I guess you're talking about Callum Smith there. Indeed. A pugilist says, Beterbiev had to do a proper breakdown job on Smith. Buatsi is strong, but he doesn't have that kind of firepower and pressure. Buatsi by UD. So, yeah, that's the first fight that was voted on by subscribers. 75% picking Joshua Buatsi for the win. Mostly by KO. Moving on to the next one then. Zhang versus Ajit Kabayel. We got the majority of people picking, let me have a look here. No, the majority of people actually picking Kabayel, excuse me. So you got 48% picking Zhang and 52% picking Kabayel. So a slight edge for Kabayel based on this subscriber poll. So pretty much a 50-50 split, according to you guys. Bilal Chowdhury saying Kabayel UD. I watched Outmatch Boxing's video on this fight, and it was very interesting. He made a lot of good points. I think, because I watch quite a few videos, but I think he's picking Zhang for the win. Or he might be picking Kabayel tentatively. I forget now anyway. If Outmatch is in the chat, maybe he can clarify. I'm an old man, my memory's going on me. But I'm picking Kabayel very tentatively. I'm not picking him with much confidence at all, because he has never been in there with anyone remotely as powerful as Zhang. He just hasn't. And Zhang can punch with both hands. And Zhang is not a Makhmudov, who's just like a big, clumsy, crude fighter. Zhang's got skills. You know, he went in there against Joseph Parker, who can really box and who's experienced, and he was able to set up that southpaw backhand and drop him twice. So Zhang has got a good boxing brain. He's got skills. He's not just going in there winging shots and hoping for the best. I mean, even against Deontay Wilder, the shot that preceded the knockout against Wilder was that right hook. Wilder came in a little reckless, gets caught up front with Zhang's right hook, spins him around. Zhang is on him. Right? I've never seen a 300-pound Chinaman move that fast. Right? But when he saw that Wilder was hurt, oh my gosh, he was on him like white on rice. Chased him down real quick. You saw his eyes light up when he saw Wilder was hurt. Chased him down, cracked him with that big left hand, and Deontay crumpled. So Zhang is very, very smart. He knows how to set up his shots. Power in both hands. Devastating. Chinese nuclear power in both hands. So it's not going to be without serious risk for Ajit Kabayel in there, especially in the early going. He needs to negotiate those early rounds so carefully because telling you, the Chinaman starts landing, he's in big trouble, I think. AB says, I think Zhang will catch him. Jerry Berry says, huge test for Kabayel. Definitely is. Pugilist says, you need to watch Kabayel versus Smakisi. Only 2 fights ago for Kabayel. He was out on his feet against an obscure southpaw. He's too open and basic for Zhang. I will follow your advice and I'll go watch it. And based upon that fight, maybe I'll change my prediction because I'm very tentatively going for Kabayel. Very, very tentatively. I've got not much confidence in that prediction. I'm just thinking about the fact that Kabayel can move when he wants. We saw that against Chisora years ago. He's coming off some good wins. He's on good form. Although Makhmudov was unproven and basic, and Sanchez was injured. So how much can we read into Kabayel's form, you know? Also the fact that Zheli Zhang has got really, really bad stamina. I mean, we talk about who is the biggest puncher in the heavyweight division. We talk about who's got the best chin and the fastest hands. But the fighter with the worst stamina in terms of top 10 has got to be Zheli Zhang. His stamina is appalling. Absolutely appalling. And that's part of the reason I've been leaning towards Kabayel, because if he can just get through those early rounds, he might be able to secure the fight in the second half. All right, so Champy says my picks are Zhang by KO, Padley by TKO. Okay. Virgil by TKO, Dubois by TKO, and Beterbiev by TKO. Okay, a bunch of TKOs. All right. You putting an accumulator on that, I reckon you get some good odds. Bilal says, isn't Zhang prone to the body? He's been hurt there before, and Kabayel is a skilled body puncher. The thing is, though, Kabayel is a good body puncher, but he's been landing body punches against orthodox fighters. And where a southpaw, their lead hand clashes with the orthodox lead hand, and you've got to punch across further when you're, let's say, throwing a right hand against a southpaw. And also, landing a left hook on a southpaw's body when they're side on is very difficult. If you just envision it and think about how the angles line up. It's very difficult landing I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's a lot more awkward trying to land a left hook to a southpaw's body when they're side on than it is an orthodox fighter. With an orthodox fighter, when they're side on, the left hook lines up perfectly with the solar plexus. But with a southpaw, the left hook is kind of landing almost on the kidney. Yeah, and oftentimes it will hit their elbow or, you know, and you have to throw it wider to hit the body of a southpaw. So it's more awkward going to a southpaw's body if they're side on. And Zhang does fight quite side on. Also, because Zhang is so powerful and he's the taller man, right? He's so powerful and he is relatively quick for his size. Going to his body is perilous. Do you know what I mean? It's not like going to Makhmudov's body, who's not a counterpuncher, or going to Frank Sanchez's body, who was just pinned on the ropes and he had no legs. Oh no, Zhang is going to be in the middle of the ring. And if you go to his body, that means you're exposing your head. So I'm not sure how many opportunities Kabayel is going to get to go to Zhang's body. You know? NPR says AJ's stamina is pretty bad. It is, but it's not as bad as Zhang's. Zhang's stamina is absolutely diabolical. I mean, just look at the Parker fight. In the final round of the Parker fight, Zhang threw no punches. I mean, no punches. And it was a close fight, and he was there throwing no punches. Unreal. And if you look at the Jerry Forrest fight, Zhang nearly got stopped because he was so gassed. He had nothing in the tank at all against Jerry Forrest. He nearly got stopped on several occasions just from fatigue. Black Dynamite says Kabayel will be better off throwing straight right hands to Zhang's stomach, but will need to pivot away immediately. Yeah, and even that is really risky, throwing the straight right hand to his body. Because again, Zhang has got the longer arms. He's the taller man, power in both hands. So he might be watching for your right hand to the body. And he can throw a right hook or meet you with a left hand. It all depends on how much quicker Kabayel is than Zhang in terms of reflexes and whether he can throw and then, you know, not have a counter come back at him because he was just too fast. Kabayel is pretty quick, but I don't know whether he's that quick. I think he's going to have to do almost a survival job in the first 4 or 5 rounds of just staying out of trouble. You know? Danny Stuntman hit the nail on the head. Zhang barely throws any punches and still gets tired. That's a fact. Okay, Home Wrecker. What's this guy's name here? Home Wreck Knee Knocker. Okay. Home Wrecking Knee Knocker says Carlos Adames has been in camp sparring with 168 and 175 pound beasts Diego Pacheco and David Benavidez. So he'll be plenty prepared to break down Sheeraz's tall body, thus spoiling the Saudi Arabian party. Well, that is fantastic prep for Adames if that's what he's been getting. Absolutely fantastic prep. You couldn't ask for better prep. But the question is, has he been doing well in those spars or well enough in those spars? Because it's all well and good sparring really good guys who are tall and whatever. But you can go in there and spar top fighters and get bashed up. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to help you. It may help you if you can do well enough. All right, so let's move on to the next fight here then. The next subscriber poll. Virgil Ortiz versus Israel Madrimov. Now, this one kind of surprised me. Not that many people have voted, just 517 at the time when I took this screenshot, 517 people. But based on that, you've got the vast majority of people, 73%, picking Israel Madrimov. Mostly on points, but there are some picking him by KO as well. All right. Just 27% going for Virgil Ortiz. I'm surprised by that. I thought that there'd be a lot more people picking Ortiz. I guess they didn't like his last performance against Boachuk. But Boachuk and Madrimov are two very different fighters, different styles, different abilities, different strengths and weaknesses. Madrimov is more of a boxer. He can slug. He has slugged a bit in the past in some of his earlier fights. But at his best, I would say he's more of a boxer with what people are now calling the classic Soviet style, fencing with the left hand, bouncing in and out of range, you know, similar to Bivol. That's the kind of idea. And he was very effective against Terence Crawford. He kept hitting Crawford with that right hand. He was throwing off Crawford's timing with his bounce. Crawford couldn't see those right hands coming because of the bounce, right? The bounce is designed to confuse you and throw off your range, so you can't measure him. You know, so Madrimov, a very good boxer. Ortiz can box. He's got a good jab. More of a pressure fighter primarily, but he kind of reminds me a little bit of Miguel Cotto, Virgil Ortiz, in his style. Not saying he's going to go on to be as great as Miguel Cotto, but again, similar stylistically. But I'm surprised that so few people are picking him. Because the times when Crawford had most success against Madrimov are actually when he got physical with him. When he managed to pin him down and get him to trade. Crawford, from what I can remember about the fight anyway, it's been a while and I only watched it live at the time. But yeah, Crawford had his best moments from what I can remember when they were trading, which a lot of people might think would be counterintuitive because he was the smaller man coming up. But again, it all comes down to styles. Crawford likes to get involved. Even though he's known as being a great boxer, he likes, as well as boxing, to actually stand in the pocket and bang it out with you. He enjoys doing that. He likes breaking people down. That's why he was on such a long KO streak. Unusual for a welterweight. Most welterweights over the past, 10 years, who were champions at 147, they were going the distance in most of their fights. Errol Spence was going the distance in a load of fights, right? Keith Thurman was going the distance. Mayweather, of course. Pacquiao was going the distance in most fights. Whereas Terence Crawford was taking everybody out. So, yeah, he had most success when he and Madrimov were exchanging. And so Virgil Ortiz, being a bigger, stronger fighter than Terence Crawford, he also likes to exchange in the pocket. Will he be more effective at drawing Madrimov into exchanges and getting the better of it? Apparently, very few people think so, based upon the results of this poll. Felix says Madrimov might stop him. Crawford has better feet than Ortiz. He's got better feet than Ortiz, but Ortiz is a more dedicated pressure fighter than Terence Crawford. See, pressure fighting is a particular... Pressure fighter comes with a particular set of skills. So you could say, for example, that, I don't know, Alexander Usyk has got better footwork than Mike Tyson, right? Mike Tyson had good footwork, right? But you could say Alexander Usyk had better footwork in terms of moving around the ring and all that type of stuff. But who's a more effective pressure fighter, Mike Tyson or Alexander Usyk? I'm telling you, it's Mike Tyson all day. So better footwork in general isn't the same as better footwork in terms of pressure fighting. Mike Tyson only fought one way, on the front foot, pressure fighting. That was his style. That's all he could do. But he did it very, very well. And I'm going to speculate. I'm going to guess or estimate that Virgil Ortiz has got better pressure fighting skills than Terence Crawford. Some people might disagree. That's okay. But because he's more dedicated to being a pressure fighter, I think he's got more skills on the front foot than Crawford, fighting that particular way that may be effective against Madrimov. Because Crawford was kind of boxing. He wasn't sure what he was doing against Madrimov most of the time. Because when he was trying to box, he kept getting caught with a right hand. Later on in the fight, he was trying to draw it into close quarters and swap shots. force the fight that way. Yeah? But I think Ortiz is actually better at doing that. I think he's better at forcing a fight on the front foot than Crawford. But we'll see. Maybe I'll turn out to be completely wrong. And I'm not sure who to pick in that one, to be honest. It's very close, in my mind, between Madrimov and Ortiz. I'm surprised, as I say, that so many people, the vast majority, are going for Madrimov. Very few people picking Ortiz. The only thing, and it's actually a big thing, that kind of makes me hesitant to pick Ortiz is that he's had all these health problems over the past few years, like really bad health problems that have caused him to pull out of multiple fights, move up in weight, so on and so forth. He's had really, really bad health problems. And when someone's got a history of bad health problems like that, yeah, it's hard to have faith in them. It's like Hughie Fury. He's had terrible health problems his whole career. It's messed up his career. Not that he was ever that good, but the health problems definitely hurt him a lot. Because not only did they hurt him and impact him physically, but also psychologically. Hughie Fury wasn't confident because of, you know, all the amount of times he would get sick. He would lose confidence in himself. So let's move on to the next poll then. Carlos Adames versus Hamza Sheeraz. We touched on this a few minutes ago. The vast majority of people, overwhelming majority of people who voted in this poll, picking Sheeraz to win. Adames has been given virtually no chance by my subscribers, it would seem. Just 19% picking Carlos Adames. What do you guys think of that? 81% picking Hamza Sheeraz. I think that is very, how can I describe it? I think they're underestimating Adames for sure, with so few people picking him. Champy says Crawford is extremely overrated. Not sure why you would say that. I think Crawford is a fantastic fighter. Extremely overrated? No. Crawford is a two-weight, undisputed, multi-weight world champion. Fantastic fighter. Yes, he had a close one with Madrimov. That doesn't mean he's not a fantastic fighter. I had Madrimov winning the fight. But it was close enough to have gone in Crawford's favor, without a doubt. I've got no issue with people who scored it for Crawford. It was close. You know, if you have a close fight that some people think you lose, that doesn't all of a sudden wipe out all of the good things you've done in your career. You know, I don't really understand that perspective. Cash says, I'll be honest, I've never seen Adames fight before. Middleweight has been completely uninteresting to me for years now. Yeah, the division has been dead really since Canelo moved up. Adames started out as a welterweight, so he's a shorter guy. Started out as a welterweight, throws a lot of shots. He's Dominican, and shout out to Henry, by the way, boxing on the edge. He's an Englishman in New York. He's been living in America for a long time. I think he's a dual citizen, dual American British citizen. But anyway, he's got a boxing channel. Go check it out, Boxing on the Edge. And he used to box himself. I think he still trains and spars and what have you. In Gleason's gym, he goes down there and whatnot. And he often talks about the Dominicans that come in the gym and the particular style that they have. And Dominicans do tend to have a style which is aggressive but also tricky. And Adames has that style. He's not like a purely offensive, come forward pressure fighter, you know, Mike Tyson style. No, Adames has got some nuance to his game. Moves his head, hits you with tricky counters. He is aggressive and he does throw a lot, but he's got some tricky moves about him, if you watch him. The reason I'm picking Sheeraz is mainly because of the size disparity. Obviously, skills pay the bills, but there comes a point when as skilled as you are, the opponent's size is just too much for you to overcome. Unless you're an Alexander Usyk, right? But very few fighters in the game are as good as he is. And yeah, I'm just not sure Adames is going to be able to overcome the size disparity. But then again, as somebody mentioned in the chat a couple of minutes ago, he's, according to them, been sparring Diego Pacheco and David Benavidez for this fight against Hamza Sheeraz, which is I mean, you literally couldn't ask for better preparation than that. Because both of those guys are arguably, certainly Benavidez, better than Hamza Sheeraz. Bigger, stronger, right? So going in there with Sheeraz after sparring those guys will almost be like a step down in levels for Carlos Adames. So, but then again, that's in sparring with 16-ounce gloves or at least 14-ounce gloves, headgear and all that type of thing. It is different. But yeah, I just think the size might be a bit too much over the long haul for Adames. I think Adames is going to cause problems early when he's sharp and he's tricky and all that, because Sheeraz isn't the most athletic fighter. He's got some athleticism to him, obviously, but he's not like the fastest reflex guy and all that kind of thing. He's more methodical, Hamza Sheeraz. He gets behind his jab. He breaks you down. If he manages to get you pinned, then he's going to unleash shots on you, hooks, the left hook to the body, uppercuts, and what have you. We saw that against Tyler Denny, right? Got rid of him very quickly. So, yeah, I just think that Sheeraz's size and strength will eventually win the day against Carlos Adames. I could be wrong. I've certainly seen, particularly stateside, a lot of people picking Adames. But my subscribers seem to be on the same page as me. Although, again, I'm kind of surprised that so many of them, it's so overwhelming in favor of Sheeraz, because Adames beating Sheeraz to me is not out of the question at all. So we've got Fight Sport Talk, for example. He's picking Adames to upset Sheeraz. And many people are. Duke McKenzie, whose prediction record is pretty fantastic over the past couple years. I mean, really fantastic. He's picking Adames to beat Hamza Sheeraz as well. And I do not scoff at Duke McKenzie's predictions at all. Duke McKenzie, you know, when I make a prediction and I find that Duke McKenzie has picked the opposite, that's when I really get anxious. Not that he can never be wrong, but yeah, he's very, very good at predicting fights. All the way back in the days, Duke McKenzie picked Evander Holyfield to beat Mike Tyson. I mean, what a prediction that was. Unbelievable. He was in the studio as a pundit, as an analyst for Sky for the first Mike Tyson-Holyfield fight, and he picked Holyfield to win. People thought he was crazy. All right, so we'll move on from this fight then. Big Boys Boxing says, pretty reliable if you pick the opposite of David Haye. But I think David Haye picked Usyk in the Fury rematch, and he got it right. So I guess even a broken clock is right twice a day. All right, moving on to this one then, which you can see in the thumbnail. Daniel Dubois versus Joseph Parker. What happens? So you've got, let's see here, 53% picking Daniel Dubois to win. So my subscribers have got Dubois as a marginal favorite. Over 1,000 people voted in this poll. A marginal favorite, Daniel Dubois. Almost a 50-50. I'm a little surprised by that, but maybe I will find out in the fight why so many people see this as a 50-50. Now, there was some idiot who turned up on this poll, a couple of idiots actually, who clearly don't understand the ethos of my channel and what the channel's all about. So these idiots were saying, oh, Hatman always picks against Joseph Parker. And another one was saying, oh, Hatman's going to be eating humble pie. I am not a Daniel Dubois fanboy. I don't give a flying you-know-what who wins this fight. I don't care. I've never been like this big Dubois fan, or I'm supporting him because he's British or because he's, background is Caribbean. Or no, I don't care. I literally don't care who wins this fight. I don't have a horse in the race, a dog in the race, however you want to describe it, at all. If Joseph Parker wins, fantastic. I don't got nothing against Joseph Parker. Good for him. But these weirdos who turn up, they project their own mindset onto me. They think that whoever I'm picking to win must be the person who I think is... Whoever I am picking to win must be the person who I want to win. No. There are certain instances where that is the case, but I can assure you that that's not the case here. And when you do have those instances where I'm picking somebody to win and I want them to win, I'm not picking them to win because I want them to win. If I'm making a boxing prediction, the most important thing for me is that I get the prediction right. There are loads of fights where I want someone to win, but I pick against them because I don't think they will. Yeah? In this fight, I'm really not bothered who wins. Whatever, If Parker wins, we get Parker fighting Usyk for undisputed. Cool, right? Usyk has never fought Parker before. It's a different style for him. And if Dubois wins, we get the rematch with Usyk. I think Dubois has improved since the first fight with Usyk. Usyk's gotten older. Will he have the same kind of motivation for a Dubois rematch that he had for the first fight? We'll see. And also, it would give Usyk the opportunity to silence any doubters who say that Dubois should have got the win over him first time because of the low blow, which some people, for some weird reason, think was a legitimate punch. So I don't care who wins the fight. Whatever. May the best man win, literally. I just think it's going to be Dubois. Could I be wrong? Of course I could be wrong. We all get predictions wrong. Right? I don't know why people are coming at me sideways over my picking of Dubois in this fight. I'm just going off the history of the fighters, recent form, yes, the styles, and so on. And Joseph Parker has been bullied out of fights on several occasions where he's come up against somebody who has dragged him into the trenches and he hasn't had the ferocity to be able to fight them off and get the win. It happened against Dylan White. It happened against Joe Joyce. If Daniel Dubois drags him into the trenches and he's not able to hurt Dubois, and look, it's heavyweight boxing, anything is possible. Even though Parker isn't renowned as one of the bigger punchers in the heavyweight division, if you catch a guy right, stuff can happen. I mean, look at the Kevin Lorena fight. He caught Dubois high on the head, wobbled him. They talk about Dubois' knee, but no, he was hurt before there was any issue with the knee. So if Parker catches Dubois right in an exchange, yeah, he could hurt him. But Parker isn't a prolific puncher. So if it gets into exchanges, I have to imagine that Dubois is going to come off best. And Parker's going to be worse for wear. Right? And as I say, Parker seems to get dogged out of fights. He's tough in the sense that he can take a beating, but there's something lacking in terms of fighting fire with fire at the highest levels with Joseph Parker. That's been his history. Now you could say, well, look at the Wilder fight. Wilder didn't come to fight. Wilder didn't have any fire. So Parker didn't have to fight fire with fire. There was no fire in front of him. With Zhang, well, he just boxed, didn't he? He moved around and waited for Zhang to get tired, and then he picked up the points. So he didn't really have to fight fire with fire. Whereas against Dubois, I have to imagine he will. He's going to be forced to fight fire with fire. And so, again, I can't think of a fight where Parker had to fight fire with fire and came out on top. When he comes out on top, it's when he's boxing. Yeah? Can he outbox Daniel Dubois for 12 rounds? Stay out of trouble. Out-slick him. Anything is possible, but Dubois has got quick feet. He's got that heavy jab that he comes in with. He's relentless. He's got a great work rate, great stamina. And he's extremely high on confidence right now. Even though both guys are in good form, I would say Dubois' wins are more impressive to me personally. Because of the adversity he had to... I mean, Parker had to overcome adversity, but he was in against guys, and I'm talking about in the Zhang fight, he was in against older guys who were very low volume. And he's acknowledged this himself. Dubois was in against guys who throw a lot of punches, particularly Miller and Hrgovic. They threw an awful lot of shots. So Dubois had a lot to contend with, and he still came through and got the stoppage victories. Against AJ wasn't throwing much. He was totally overwhelmed by the ferocity of Dubois' attacks and the frequency of them. Now, some people say Dubois might be overlooking Joseph Parker because of, when he jumped in the ring after the Usyk Fury rematch, when he's already got a fight scheduled with Parker. It's possible. And I don't think Dubois is the most intelligent guy in the world. No offense. So a guy like that, when his ego gets built up, confidence and what have you because of recent form, maybe there is a danger that he could underestimate Parker. But this is a screenshot I'm about to show you here of Daniel Dubois at, I think it was the public workout, maybe today or yesterday. Go and watch this video. Daniel Dubois, well, this looks like it's in a gym, not public. So yeah, gym workout, whatever. Daniel Dubois looks very sharp on the pads. In fact, I think this is the sharpest I've ever seen him on the pads. I've never seen his hands look this quick before. Now, it could be because he's wearing fight gloves. Those are fight gloves. Those are not 16-ounce sparring gloves. Those are like 10-ounce fight gloves he's wearing there. Obviously, you can move your hands a lot faster in 10-ounce fight gloves than 18-ounce sparring gloves. Nevertheless, he looks very, very sharp on the pads. Very sharp. Obviously, there are some flaws in Dubois' game, in his style. Very little upper body move. He does move his upper body a bit, and I think Don Charles has been working on that to get him to have a bit more of a supple back and be able to duck underneath punches more. So he does do it here and there, but he's not that proficient at it yet. So he's still kind of stiff in the back, and maybe Parker will be able to exploit that because Parker's very fluid. Maybe Parker will be able to get down low, change his levels, and throw Dubois off by changing levels, moving, bending at the waist, bending his knees, giving Dubois different looks, feints, and all that type of business. Maybe. But, I don't know. I think Dubois is just going to be too young, too aggressive, too forceful, sticking that jab in Parker's face, and eventually take Parker out in the 8th or the 9th. As I said in my prediction video, if Parker is to win this, similar to Kabayel against Zhang, he has to get out of the early rounds without taking a lot of damage. But different to Kabayel against Zhang, Daniel Dubois has got fantastic stamina. So in the second half of the fight, he's still going to be able to go. All right. The reason I say that Parker needs to get out of the early rounds is because, in my estimation, the way to beat Daniel Dubois, the way to get him to implode, is to take his favorite punches away from him, which are his jab, particularly, but also his right hand. If you can take those shots away from him, so he's not landing them clean, he's not landing them as frequently as he likes, I think that's when anxiety sets in with Dubois. And he starts becoming uncomfortable because, as other people have speculated, I'm not aware that he's ever been diagnosed, but many of us have speculated this. I suspect he's on the spectrum. And people who are on the spectrum have a different way of processing things than what they call neurotypical. Most of us are classed as neurotypical. Okay, so we process situations and stress and stuff like that differently than people on the spectrum. So to many people, Dubois' behavior against Usyk and against Joyce was very odd, particularly against Usyk, because he wasn't taking the kind of punishment against Usyk that he took against Hrgović, for example, even against Miller. Or at least not that type of bullying. I mean, Usyk was coming forward and hitting him with shots, but again, he went down from a jab against Usyk. He took far bigger shots than that in other fights and didn't go down. So why did he go down against Usyk from a jab? Do you know what I mean? It's because mentally he checked out of the fight. Mentally, he was breaking down. It wasn't a stamina thing. I don't think he was particularly hurt. I think because of his, let's call it neurodivergence, you know, his suspected place on the spectrum, he short-circuited and he couldn't handle the situation because he didn't feel comfortable not being able to land his normal shots. That's what I think happened. And therefore, if Parker can take Dubois' offense away from him, maybe in the second half of the fight, he can, you know, get that type of reaction from Dubois, where he feels anxious and he's questioning himself and he can't land the shots he wants to land. So, yeah, if Parker can get out the first half of the fight without taking too much punishment and, you know, keep that defense going on into the second half of the fight, then maybe he can win. Maybe he can. But it's going to be a tough task because Dubois is more confident now than he's ever been in his career. And he's going to come at Joseph Parker like a train. Pause. Pause. Okay, just checking back in with a live chat here. Big up my brother over there in Ireland for the super chat. Big respect to you as always. He says, do you think Dubois has improved since losing to Usyk? I don't think so. People forget how dominant Usyk was versus Dubois. Respect from Ireland, my lad. Yes, I personally think he has improved. Not so much technically. There are small technical improvements I think he's made, but more so mentally and emotionally. So when people say that he's a different fighter now than the one who fought Usyk, again, I don't think he's overhauled himself in terms of what he does, the way he throws shots, the way he moves his head, moves his feet. I just think he's a lot more confident now. And it's an old adage in boxing. It's a cliche. People are tired of hearing it. But boxing is, we can put whatever arbitrary percentage we want, 80% mental, 70% mental, 30% physical. And I just think Daniel Dubois is so confident now after the run of form he's been on that in an Usyk rematch, and you also have to bear in mind that Usyk has done it all now. And he's a much older man. Well, much older. He's a bit older than when he fought Dubois the first time. How well can Usyk get up for fights at this point? You know? When you've climbed to the top of the mountain and you're 38, you've made massive amounts of money. I mean, Usyk must have made more money in his career than he would have ever dreamed when he first turned pro. You know, the money he's made from the Fury fights is astronomical. I mean, for the Fury rematch, I think he made something like 80 million or whatever. That was the report. Huge fight purses. So, Usyk, of course, has always been the consummate pro. He's never lacked for motivation his whole career. But he's only human at the end of the day. And he did beat, as you say, he did beat Dubois comfortably first time around. And maybe that could play into him not being that motivated for the rematch. The only real motive for Usyk in a Dubois rematch is becoming two-time undisputed at heavyweight, something that in the 4-belt era, maybe even in the 3-belt era, I think, no one's ever done before. But also silencing the doubters, the naysayers, the critics who claimed that the shot he got dropped with in the first Dubois fight was legit. So those are the two things that he would presumably use to motivate himself. But I don't know whether that'll be enough, you know? So long story short, what I'm saying here is I'm not sure Usyk would be as good in a rematch against Dubois as he was first time around. I'm not sure. There's a question mark in my head about it. And I do think Dubois would be better in a rematch. Again, not so much technically, but more so in terms of his confidence. I think he would be willing to take more chances, throw more shots, etc. So in that sense, I think he's better. But thank you as always for the super chat. Big up to my bro over there in Ireland. Guryon says Usyk doesn't really need motivation. He just enjoys training. That is true. It is true, but there are levels of intensity in training. Shout out to Charles B in the live chat there. We got Charles B every time. Yeah, there are levels of intensity. And one thing that some people observed after the second Fury fight, when Usyk was at the Ring Magazine Awards, is that Usyk appeared to have put quite a bit of weight on. He was sat next to Amir Khan, and Amir Khan, kind of tapped his gut, and Usyk kind of laughed about it. I've never seen that before. I've never seen Usyk pile a bunch of weight on. Not like he, came out 280 pounds, but he looked like he'd put quite a bit on of fat. And I think that is indicative of his mindset having climbed to the top of the mountain and achieved all his goals. There's literally nothing else for Usyk to achieve now. And so the fact he's talking about only having 2 more fights tells you something about his mindset. And will that be reflected in the amount of is he telling us that he doesn't have the motivation now to carry on for more than 2 more fights? Is that what he's telling us? You guys, let me know what you think. Or is he just being sensible? Has he spoken to his team and they've said, look, you're 38, got plenty of gray in your hair, you're in a division against much bigger guys, younger guys coming through. You're not going to be able to go on forever. If you bow out after 2 more fights, you've got a perfect career. Assuming you win those fights. Undisputed cruiserweight, 2-time undisputed heavyweight, a unique champion. You'll go down in the history books as one of the greatest fighters of all time in any weight class. And many people will argue one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. Top 10, top 5 in many people's books. I'm not necessarily saying I agree top 5 based upon the heavyweight resume he has, but I will not be scoffing at people making the argument. Yeah? Usyk is a fantastic fighter. So maybe it's more so that people persuading him it's not a good idea to go on for more than 2 more. That could be all it is. But it could also be he's telling us he doesn't have the motivation now to fight any more than 2 more times. And that's why I think he should retire now. I don't think he should do the Dubois rematch or Parker or anybody else. I think he should retire right now. I think beating Fury the second time was the perfect time to bow out. I don't see what he can really gain. There's always going to be naysayers. There's always going to be people trying to pick at your resume and, go through fights you've had and say, oh, this was controversial though. There's always going to be that. You're never going to be able to get rid of that. You look at the greatest fighters of all time and they've got people picking their resume apart. So I think if Usyk retires now, it's as good as it gets. Mark Hunter says, I think Usyk will be better in a Dubois rematch. Guryon says, metabolism slows down in your mid-30s, harder to keep the fat off. Well, I know all about that, unfortunately. Very frustrating because, I grew up as an athlete. I was always tremendously athletic, muscular, good sprinter, played lots of different sports, boxing obviously. And when you have those kind of genetics, you do take it for granted. So I used to eat all sorts of rubbish as a teenager and in my 20s But because I had the genetics, I could just burn it all off easy. Couple weeks in the gym, shredded, muscles, everything. And you think you're invincible. You know, you have an arrogance about you when you are a jock. Is that how you describe me? I don't know. They don't really have jocks in the UK like that. But, you know, when you're an athlete, you kind of have an arrogance about you. When you're young, you think that you'll never get fat. I used to say, I'll never be fat. And if I did ever put on weight, as I say, I could lose it so quick. But once you get into your 30s and particularly past 35, it is so hard to lose weight. Unbelievably hard. I have to go to extremes today in order to get weight off and keep weight off that I never had to do in my 20s. You know, so for example, I've been on a hardcore diet. I've been water fasting and I put myself on a very hardcore diet over the past, 2 months now. It's been basically a keto diet. At first I was eating a lot of lamb chops, yeah, high in fat, because, you know, when you're trying to get into ketosis, you eat fatty foods, you're training your body to use fat as fuel. So I was eating a lot of lamb chops because it got a lot of fat on them, and broccoli and stuff like that. But I found that my weight loss was actually not as fast as I wanted it to be when I was eating all the lamb chops. So I came off those and just went to poached eggs and spinach. And I eat once a day. 4 poached eggs with spinach and a bit of cheese, like feta cheese, a little bit of feta cheese, 4 poached eggs and spinach. Eating once a day, it's hardcore, okay? But I'm able to lose a lot of weight doing that. But in my 20s, I could be eating fried chicken and chips, you know, burgers, all sorts of stuff. Go in the gym, 3-4 weeks, shredded. So yeah, definitely, you know, I train harder now. And I'm more disciplined now than I was then, but it's so much harder to lose the weight. So you make a good point about Usyk there. But then, again, that shows his age, right? Even if Usyk is just as disciplined and it's Father Time that's causing him to put a bit more weight on, Father Time makes you deteriorate in the ring. So, again, Usyk is not getting better now, I don't think, personally. I think he's on a downward trajectory. I don't think Usyk is as good today as he was when he fought AJ the first time. I think that was Usyk's best performance at heavyweight when he fought AJ the first time. Never mind what AJ was doing. Look at what Usyk was doing. Usyk was moving his head far more. He was moving his feet far more. He was finding far more angles. He was more like a heavyweight Lomachenko in the first AJ fight than he's been in any subsequent fight. And I know, or I think he was with Lomachenko's dad, still training him then. He's no longer with Lomachenko's dad. But yeah, I don't think Usyk is as good now as he was when he fought AJ the first time. I think he's on a downward trajectory. He's still obviously fantastically good, but I think he's on a downward trajectory. And Dubois, because of his confidence and momentum, I think he's on an upward trajectory. Muhammad Ahmad Bruce Lee, great name, says, Haran, do you think there will be knockdowns in the Sheeraz fight? Yes, I think there will be. I think we will get knockdowns in the Sheeraz fight. Matt says, I'm the same. In my early 20s, I could drop 30 kilos in 4 months. Absolutely crazy just how much your metabolism slows down as you age. It is indeed. I lost since, and this has been a real tough slog, I lost since October, 15 kilos. And that was a hell of a slog. I'm telling you, a hell of a slog. Losing 15 kilos since October. Dear, oh dear, what a slog that's been. Hardcore dieting, training, all sorts. The weight just won't come off, man. No, it comes off, but it's very tough getting it off. I'm in my mid-40s. Pugilist says Usyk used to say he needs to force feed to get up to 220. Right now he weighs 240. He said this himself. He's been enjoying life. Yeah. And it's all well and good enjoying life. Nothing wrong with enjoying life. But when you are a professional boxer, you need to watch out. And the fact he's doing that, enjoying life now, to me shows that mentally he's kind of got one foot out the door. Felix says really helps when you eat whole foods instead of eating out. Yeah, as I say, my diet has been eggs, poached, and eggs and spinach with some feta cheese for weeks and weeks now. All right, so let's move on to the final fight then of this card. Let's see what the subscribers think. Artur Beterbiev, Dmitry Bivol 2, what happens? We've got Artur Beterbiev by KO, 27%. Bivol by KO, only 6%. Beterbiev on points, 23%. Bivol on points, 45%. So we've got a marginal favor for Dmitry Bivol. Okay? 51% picking him, 49% picking Beterbiev. Based upon the way the first fight went, this is hardly surprising because it was genuinely razor close. Absolutely razor close. So this, for me, is just another coin toss. I think it will go right down to the wire again. And I hope it's more definitive this time because I don't like all the accusations of robbery. And I mean, sometimes there are legitimate robberies, of course. I don't want that to be the case here. I would rather see a definitive winner. But I suspect we might not get one, and it could be absolutely razor close again. We will see. How many of you guys think it will be really definitive this time? We can get a show of hands in the chat. How many of you think it will be definitive? Encircled says any 7-5 today is called a robbery. Indeed. Andy says Beterbiev all day. So I guess you think it will be definitive in front of definitive in favor of Beterbiev. Orca says I think it will be definitive. Felix says Beterbiev by KO. Okay. Can't get any more definitive than that. And Circle says no, I think it will be Bivol by a point, which then sets up the trilogy, of course. Cash says when I saw Kadriov in the ring, I knew it was wraps for Bivol. Indomo says, I think Beterbiev will KO him this time. Charles B says, I think Beterbiev will take over earlier than before. Guryon says a stoppage win for Beterbiev. All right. ECA says Kadriov, the Chechen leader, the one who was closely associated to Ruslan Chagayev, right? Charles B says Cash the Nuts Chechen. Yeah, he's a crazy guy. He was a warlord. Warlord turned what is his official title in that region? Is he like, do they have presidents in Chechnya? Because it's still part of Russia, isn't it? The Russian Federation. So is he the president of Chechnya? Don Gorgon says, I want Bivol to win, but I'd be more than happy with a Beterbiev win just so there's no trilogy. The division needs to move on. I agree. Nothing against Bivol at all if he gets it. more power to him, but there are too many rematches taking place right now. Charles B says, Head of Republic. Okay, that's his official title. Head of Republic. Encircled says, I hate how rematches and trilogies just make fight results feel meaningless. We got a person here, Kyle says, a KO from Bivol. He's picking Bivol to get the KO. Okay. Michael Moss says, I think Bivol is so upset about the loss that he's going to trade more, eventually leaving himself open to a counter, therefore being KO'd. Anant says, what technical adjustments could Bivol make to win? Well, as someone alluded to there, perhaps he can be more aggressive and stick it on Beterbiev a little bit more. Obviously, you have to pick your spots. Can't be reckless about it, but he does have so much faster hands than Beterbiev. He might be able to let some shots go and get Beterbiev to shell up in spots, you know? Even if a lot of the punches are hitting gloves, it still catches the eye of the judges as long as Beterbiev don't get any back on you. Matt says, if Bivol loses again, do you expect him to retire or rebuild or just retire? I think it depends on the manner of the loss. If it's like a really close fight again that he feels he won, that might make him so sick to his stomach that he would retire. But if he loses legitimately and let's say Beterbiev retires, then maybe Bivol will carry on. When I say legitimately, if he loses decisively and then Beterbiev retires, then maybe Bivol will carry on because he's still a relatively young man, right? He's still in his early 30s maybe. What is he, 33? Jerry says, is there a rematch clause for Parker versus Triple D? I would imagine there would be, because I think it's a voluntary defense for Daniel Dubois. I stand to be corrected, but I think it's a voluntary defense. And with voluntary defenses, rematch clauses come as standard. Even in the 90s. Well, actually, no, let me not say even in the 90s. No. Because there were some instances where with a voluntary defense, there was no rematch clause. But it was very common in the 90s. Let's just put it that way. For voluntary defense, there's a rematch clause. Very common. Even back then. Orca says it's a voluntary defense, yes. And so I would be absolutely amazed then if there isn't a rematch clause in the contract. There surely is. Bear in mind, both fighters are promoted by Frank Warren. So there surely will be. Cash says rematch clauses just need to be banned by the sanctioning bodies or disallowed champions from having them at the very least. I hear you. The problem is, and the difficulty in getting people to want to do that, is that rematches tend to be more lucrative, especially when they're immediate rematches. They tend to generate more money than the first fight. And this is why it'll be very difficult to discourage the industry from having rematches and discourage the sanctioning bodies, because these sanctioning bodies are getting paid sanctioning fees. They're getting a cut. So rematches work for them, you know. I have to imagine the Usyk Fury rematch, and I don't know this, I stand to be corrected, but I have to imagine the Usyk Fury rematch generated more money than the first fight did. The first fight kind of surprised people with how good it was and how dramatic it was. Shout out to Charles B for the super chat each and every time. Big up Charles B. Much appreciated, my brother. Somebody here saying he'd love a trilogy between Beterbiev and Bivol. Okay. You know, I don't mind trilogies at all. I just don't want them to be immediately, consecutive. Like with Ali Frazier, their trilogy was spaced out. It wasn't like 3 fights in a row. It was spaced out over a number of years. The same goes for Holyfield and Bowe. Their trilogy was spaced out over a number of years. I don't like these back-to-back-to-back rematches. So, for example, the first Ali Frazier fight, which happened in Madison Square Garden, obviously Joe Frazier got the win. Ali then went off into the wilderness and he was fighting a bunch of contenders and all sorts of other fights. Joe Frazier ended up getting wiped out by George Foreman. And then it was basically a crossroads fight between Ali and Frazier, right? After Ali got beaten by Foreman, they had their non-title bout against each other. That was their rematch. Yeah. A lot of water had gone under the bridge. A lot had happened between their first and second fights. Ali obviously won the second fight. Then Ali went off and, had other ups and downs in his career and whatever. Eventually fought George Foreman, beat him. And after that, he had the trilogy match with Joe Frazier. So it was spaced out over a number of years. It wasn't a forced thing. It was organic. Every time Ali fought Frazier, it felt like the right time for the fight. Similar thing with Holyfield and Bowe. First fight, Holyfield was champion, undisputed. Riddick Bowe comes in, dethrones him. Holyfield, actually, to be fair, it wasn't an immediate rematch, but Holyfield had only had one fight, if memory serves me correct, in between the first and the second Bowe bouts. And that was against Alex Stewart, who was someone that Holyfield had previously defeated. So he at least had one fight in between, then he fought the Bowe rematch. Then there was several years before the trilogy fight. So Holyfield lost to Michael Moorer. He had some time away from boxing. He came back, had some bouts, then went into the Bowe trilogy match at a time when Bowe had lost, his titles. So obviously, Holyfield took Bowe's titles from him. Then Bowe kind of came back and he held the WBO belt for a bit. I think it was the WBO belt that was contested for the third Holyfield-Bowe fight. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Such a long time ago. But anyway, their trilogy was spread out over a number of years. Same as Ali and Frazier. And most of the old school trilogies from the 80s and 90s were like that. They were spread out. So I don't mind trilogies in principle as long as they happen organically. Whereas these days, rematches are so forced, And it's, as I say, I think it's really a commercial thing. The industry wants these rematches because they tend to be more lucrative than the first fights. CPB says Bowe vacated. Well, Bowe got rid of one belt after he beat Holyfield the first time. That was the WBC, but he still had 2 more belts. He lost those 2 other belts to Holyfield in the rematch. Holyfield lost those 2 belts to Michael Moorer. Michael Moorer lost one of his belts. I think, did Moorer get stripped of a belt? Or did Holyfield? I forget now, so long ago. But anyway, Moorer lost at least one of his belts, maybe 2 of them to George Foreman, who became the oldest heavyweight champion of all time. In the meantime, Lennox Lewis had picked up the WBC belt. He defended it a few times, got knocked out by Oliver McCall. Oliver McCall had a couple of defenses, then got beat by Frank Bruno. Frank Bruno got beat by Mike Tyson. It was such a convoluted scene in the 90s in the heavyweight division. But yeah. Shout out to Adam for the super chat. He says Keyshawn Davis versus Shakur and Tank. Personally, right now, I think Shakur Stevenson beats him. Tank Davis is a very, very good fighter. As a person, he's an absolute donut, right? I mean, I think most of us agree on that. The only people who really like Tank Davis as a person are people who are as ignorant as he is. And hopefully there aren't too many people like that in the world. Right? But, you know, you look at Tank Davis fans and they're all like proper ignorant. But as a fighter, he is fantastic. But in that Frank Martin fight, I don't know. Maybe I saw some deterioration there. Not like Tank hasn't been outboxed in a few rounds in previous fights and managed to come back and stop people. But against Frank Martin, I almost sensed that Tank was getting a little anxious with the way the fight was going. Obviously, he got a tremendous knockout in the end. But how long can he keep doing that for? Going in there against guys who are able to take rounds off him, outbox him, and then, like Deontay Wilder, pull a punch out of the blue and turn the fight on its head. How long can Tank do that for? Keyshawn Davis might be the guy, if Tank was actually willing to fight him, who gives Tank his first loss. Maybe. I give Keyshawn Davis more of a chance against Tank than I give him against Shakur Stevenson personally. Because Stevenson is a better boxer than Tank. Tank can box, but Stevenson's skills are on a different level to Tank, in my view. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, I have this conflicting thought that UK boxing versus US boxing are completely different sports. Their fighting styles conflict in so many different ways. Yeah, they're different for sure. These days, and this is one of the reasons they're so different, US boxing is primarily focused and concentrated in the lower weight classes, right? Most of the best US boxers are welterweights, junior middleweights, so on and so forth. Whereas in UK boxing, for whatever reason, it's very top heavy. And when I say top heavy, I mean that literally. So many heavyweights. And heavyweights generally are not as skilled as smaller fighters. And there's a tradition in heavyweight boxing. I call it a tradition, a trend. Because the skill level is not as high and never has been as high at heavyweight as the lower weights. Because the skill level is not as high at heavyweight, the bar for entry is lower. So in the heavyweight division throughout the years, you've always had guys who've basically had damn near no amateur fights that have stepped into professional boxing and become champions. Yeah, there's always been guys like that. So for example, Oliver McCall had very few amateur fights. A handful of them. Turned pro, was basically a circuit journeyman, but eventually knocked out Lennox Lewis and became heavyweight champion. With damn near, he did have some amateur fights, but a very, very limited amateur background. Tim Witherspoon was another one. Hardly any amateur fights at all. Limited number of pro fights, goes in there and gives a very good account of himself against Larry Holmes back in the 1980s. Hasim Rahman was another one. Very few amateur fights, okay? Steps into professional boxing. Knocks out poor Lennox Lewis, right? He got knocked out by two guys that had hardly any amateur background. Lewis, of course, was an elite amateur. So there's a history of this in the heavyweight division because the bar of entry is lower than it is in lighter divisions because the skill level isn't as high. And if you're a big guy and you can punch and you can take a shot naturally, you know, you're in with a shot. So, yeah, I think that might be part of what plays into what you're saying, whereby US boxing and UK boxing are very different, especially these days, because UK boxing is far more top heavy, you know, a lot of heavyweights, not so many successful guys in the lower weight classes. And heavyweights have got a very different way of fighting generally than smaller fighters do. But of course, there is an African-American style, you know, slick boxing and all that business, which they do the best. Many British fighters have tried to emulate it over the years and fighters from other countries, but they don't do it as well that particular style. So I'll say that as well. It doesn't necessarily mean that style is the supreme style that beats all other styles necessarily, but they do that particular technique the best. Shout out to Matt again for the super chat. He says, for example, I cannot see Padley's style have even a remote chance against a mechanic like Shakur Stevenson. Mark Chamberlain was unproven just on a large platform that exaggerated his skill level. Yeah, but Padley is not a top fighter in the UK. You know, he's had some success, but this is not somebody that would be viewed like a Tyson Fury, a Daniel Dubois, you know, you name a top UK fighter. Padley is not viewed like that in the UK. So you're taking maybe a second tier or a third tier UK fighter and you're putting him in against an elite American fighter. So it's not really like for like, basically. Shout to Matt again for another super chat. He says, Josh Padley had 0 amateur fights against an Olympic. Well, there you go. Yeah, you've laid it out yourself there. The 3-division world champion. Only way I see if Shakur is injured via his hands. Indeed. That would be the biggest upset for a very long time if Shakur Stevenson was to lose this fight. He says, Matt again says, Mark Chamberlain's knockout against Wahab wasn't impressive to me. The only time Wahab stepped up against Liam Dillon, he lost. Indeed. But I can't really complain about this fight because it's a very late replacement. You know, how good an opponent can you really get on a couple of days' notice? I've seen some people talk about the fact that Padley is a part-time electrician and what have you. Yeah, but again, short notice is going to be very hard to get somebody good to take a fight against Stevenson. Very, very hard. CPB says, Bo vacated the WBO belt before the Holyfield Trilogy fight because of a dispute with Don King. Okay. So you've been digging in the boxing history books there, unless you've got a tremendous memory. Because I can't remember that particular detail so far back. I remember some details, of course, that far back, but not that particular detail. Pennant says, Bomac and his team will be a very good boxing trainer for Jared Anderson. I agree. I agree with that 100%. And I thought, I could be wrong here, but I thought that Anderson was quite close to Crawford, or maybe not. Maybe he's close to Stevenson. Yeah, he's good friends with Stevenson. But Stevenson and Crawford are tight, right? So maybe they should do that hookup. But again, Jared Anderson appears to be immature mentally and emotionally. And that immaturity makes him stubborn. As in, he may not be willing to do the best things for himself, put himself in the best environments. Ishtashi says, do you think the UK has better heavyweights because there aren't many other options for athletic big guys in the US with NBA and NFL? Well, this is the common argument that people make. The only reason why the US isn't dominating heavyweight boxing anymore is because there are all these other options for big guys in America, which there aren't for big guys in places like, the UK and whatnot. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. And the reason I don't buy it, I'm not saying it doesn't play somewhat of a part, but I've lived long enough to have seen multiple eras in heavyweight boxing. And the past 20 years, there has been way more talented heavyweights in British boxing than I've ever seen before. Back in the 90s, there was Lennox Lewis, there was Gary Mason, there was Frank Bruno. That was it. That was it. The other guys were really not very good that were hanging around in the British scene for basically 20 years. The other British heavyweights were not up to much. And not to say R.I.P. Gary Mason, by the way, but he wasn't great either, Gary Mason. He was a tough guy, he was strong and all that, but he wasn't like really great. Only Lennox Lewis and Frank Bruno had success at world level. Lewis, of course, is a great fighter, all-time great. But the UK heavyweight scene wasn't very deep in the 80s and 90s at all. It's far deeper now, okay? So that is to do with the investment that there's been in boxing in the UK. And also the success of heavyweights like, dare I say it, Audley Harrison in the Olympics, David Haye as cruiserweight and heavyweight in the pros, Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Daniel Dubois. Success breeds success, basically. Nothing succeeds like success. So it isn't just a matter of there being less talent in America. It's also a matter of there being, when I say less talent, I mean less talent than there used to be. It's also a case of there being more talent in the heavyweight division in particular in the UK than there used to be. And if you look at the Soviets back in the time of the USSR, they used to mash up American boxers all the time. Oh, yes, they did. There was a Soviet fighter who was a beast in the amateurs. This would have been late 70s going into the early 80s. I wish I could remember his name off the top of my head. I've actually mentioned him in videos in the past, years ago. But he was destroying all the Americans. And this was at a time when boxing was a mainstream sport in the United States. Obviously, he's not a British fighter, but again, there's this notion that if it weren't for NFL and all these other sports, America would just be dominating the heavyweight division forever. I don't buy it. They weren't dominating the amateurs when certain Soviet fighters were about, right? They were mashing up the top American heavyweights. So, American heavyweights might be more of a force today if there wasn't so many other opportunities in different sports. But I don't buy this idea that they'd be dominating, because particularly with the fall of the Iron Curtain and all the ex-Soviet country fighters becoming professionals now, it's different. And of course, that argument doesn't work with lower weights, does it? Because the guys in the lower weights, well, they can't be NBA players or NFL players. Yeah? Welterweights and what? There are some small guys in the NBA, but not many. Some small guys in the NFL, but not many. Kickers and stuff like that, right? But generally, in the NFL and NBA, it's very big people. But America doesn't dominate the lighter weights in the way that they used to. Yeah, there's still a lot of talent there. They got a lot of success, but not like they used to. There's far more Mexican fighters, particularly, as I say, the Eastern Europeans have come in, and so on. So, if it was all down to NFL and NBA, then you wouldn't have expected, or there shouldn't be, any less success for American fighters in the lower weight classes than there used to be back in the days. There shouldn't be any less dominance. Shout out to Matt again for the super chat. He says, Richard Torres Jr. currently is America's current hope for high-level fighting, but he's in a sticky predicament as a tweener, as I like to say. I guess you mean in terms of his physical size. Matt also says US style predominantly accommodates defensive-minded fighters now. This is more effective in lighter weights where the punches don't have as much impact. Yeah. And I think, something like a Philly shell is in part predicated on your ability to turn yourself into a blade. Make yourself a tiny target. If you're a 5'8" welterweight, it's easier to do that. When you are a 6'8" heavyweight, you're much physically bigger. The gaps in your Philly shell are going to be bigger. There's no way around it because of the way your body is configured, the size of your body. So people are going to be able to get through. Remember, anyone over 154 pounds, or is it? I think it starts at 154. Yeah. So anyone over 147 wears 10-ounce gloves. A lot of people don't realize this. Heavyweights wear the same size gloves or the same weight gloves as middleweights do. Yeah, 10 ounce. So if you're a middleweight, 160 pounds, 5'10", or you're a heavyweight, 6'9", 280 pounds, you're wearing the same size gloves. They have versions of 10-ounce fight gloves, which are XL versions. So they make the hand compartment bigger to accommodate bigger hands, and they distribute the padding slightly differently, I guess a bit more thinly, to accommodate heavyweights, but the weight of the glove is exactly the same. So the point I'm making is heavyweight defenses and guards are going to be more porous than a welterweight defense and a welterweight guard. That's just the way it is. So, you're never going to get a heavyweight, generally who's as defensively proficient as the, Pernell Whitakers or the Floyd Mayweathers of the world. You're never going to get that. It's not realistic for somebody that size to be able to defend themselves that well. Indeed, Matt says, it's very unrealistic in the modern heavyweight era for a fighter to use a hit and not get hit style for 12 rounds unless they are former cruisers. Yeah, the guys are too big. They're too big to be able to pull that off against top opposition. Now, Matt says, funny this is, a lot of the young athletic lightweight fighters were former professional soccer players. Somebody mentioning the fact that Crawford was wearing 10-ounce gloves for the first time when he moved up to 154, and that might account for why he wasn't able to hurt Madrimov, at least not much. He wasn't able to stop him. That stopped his KO run that he was on. Because he did buzz him a few times, I seem to remember, but yeah, he didn't get him out of there, didn't drop him. So Madrimov broke Crawford's streak. The gloves might have been part of it, and also the fact that Madrimov is just a bigger man than Crawford is used to fighting and was able to take the power better than welterweights. Orca is picking Ortiz to beat Madrimov. Not many people are. So it's interesting to see one person there picking Ortiz. I think it's a very close fight myself. But the overwhelming majority of my subscribers who voted in the poll, at least, are going with Madrimov strongly. But I think it's a close fight. I think Ortiz's jab, his ability to apply pressure, he's got good hand speed. He throws in combination with both hands. I think he'll give Madrimov plenty of problems in there, personally. I think it's a 50-50. And Matt says there as well. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. People forget Ortiz is a body snatcher. Yep, he goes very well to the body. Very well to the body. And one thing I'll say about Eastern European fighters or fighters from the old Eastern Bloc, because I know Madrimov isn't actually from Eastern Europe. I think it's Central Asia. Kazakhstan's in Central Asia. But still, the old Eastern Bloc fighters, is that they don't concentrate on body work, on body punching, as much as American-based fighters. American-based fighters were perhaps the pioneers in body punching. And when I say American-based, I'm going to incorporate the whole of the Americas. Latin America, Central America, everything. Body punching was pioneered by fighters from the Americas. As far as I am aware, they were the ones who concentrated on it more so than fighters in Europe. And because there's so much of an emphasis on amateur boxing, winning Olympic titles and all this type of stuff with the old Eastern Bloc guys, where, due to the old amateur point scoring system, body shots were not as, it's changed a bit now as I understand it, but body shots were not as important. So these guys would turn pro and they would barely throw any body shots. And because they're barely throwing body shots, they're not used to taking body shots from the other Eastern Bloc guys that they're fighting. So, long story short, I think that a lot of the Eastern European guys or former Eastern Bloc guys are not as conditioned to take body shots as maybe some of the fighters from the Americas, particularly like Mexican fighters and stuff like that, because they just swap body shots all day long. They're tough down there. So it will be interesting to see how Madrimov deals with Ortiz's body attack. Very good comment there from Matt. All right, peeps, I'm going to wrap this one up here. An earlier one today. Shout out to all of you who contributed to the conversation. I always enjoy chatting to you guys. Special shout out to everyone who donated via Super Chat. Make sure you guys take care of yourselves. Be good. And I'll catch you next time. I'm out.